Shadow Creek Manor. It had been the focal point of our family's legacy for over a century, sitting majestically above Shadow Creek Lake. Its granite walls and sprawling verandas were the backdrop to countless family gatherings, a testament to the Winters family's standing in the community. Generations had summered there, each leaving their mark on the estate's rich history. But beneath the surface, the manor held secrets, and its fate was about to be decided. I smoothed the lines of my charcoal power suit, its understated elegance, a stark contrast to my sister Brianna, who was already holding court in the lawyer's waiting room. She was draped in a flamboyant scarlet dress, utterly inappropriate for a somber will reading. Our father Julian sat beside her, his perfectly styled hair gleaming under the recession lightning. Beside him, our mother dabbed her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Even in grief, appearances were everything. "Serafina." Julian greeted me, his tone clipped. "You're 3 minutes behind schedule." "Apologies," I replied, taking the seat opposite them. There was an unforeseen delay at the research facility. Still toiling away at that little science project, Brianna drew her voice dripping with condescension. I ignored her. They still hadn't grasped the reality of my work. They believed I was struggling to keep my biotechnology firm afloat, a quaint hobby for a woman in their eyes. Julian had repeatedly urged me to abandon my foolish pursuit and join his company. They had no idea that my firm was on the verge of a medical breakthrough that could change the world. Mr. Abernathy, the family's ancient and perpetually weary lawyer, shuffled into the room, his wire-rimmed glasses perched precariously on his nose. "Now that everyone is present, let's proceed with the distribution of assets following Mr. Julian Winters' recent transition to emeritus status." "Semi-retirement," Julian corrected sharply. "It's a strategic repositioning, a reallocation of resources." Abernathy nodded unfazed. The stroke that had forced Julian to relinquish control was the elephant in the room. "The primary matter at hand," Abernathy continued, "concerns the disposition of property, specifically Shadow Creek Manor." The air in the room thickened. Shadow Creek was the linchpin of our family's identity, passed down through generations. My grandfather had only fathered my father, who had unfortunately, in his eyes, only daughters. "I've given this considerable thought." Julian began adopting his familiar CEO persona. "Shadow Creek requires stewardship. It needs someone who appreciates its legacy, someone who embodies the Winters family's values." Brianna preened her eyes, already calculating the renovations she'd make. Legacy to them meant galas, polo matches, and maintaining the right social circles. They were oblivious to the fact that Shadow Creek had nearly been lost 5 years ago, when Julian's company teetered on the brink of collapse, a crisis he had refused to acknowledge until it was almost too late. "Therefore," he declared, "it's settled. Brianna is best suited to inherit Shadow Creek." Brianna gasped dramatically. "Oh, Daddy!" Mother dabbed furiously at her dry eyes. "After all," Julian added, glancing dismissively at me, "Serafina is preoccupied with her endeavors in the city. She simply wouldn't have the time to manage a property of this magnitude." My endeavors were on the verge of revolutionizing genetic engineering, propelling me to the forefront of my field. Success they had never even bothered to read about. "Besides," Brianna simpered, "I practically live there already. The charity functions, the luncheons, the gatherings. The wild parties that end up splashed across the gossip blogs," I supplied helpfully. She flushed scarlet. "Those were networking events." "If you say so." I smirked. I opened my laptop, typing in my complex password. "Before we proceed, there's a minor detail concerning Shadow Creek you should be aware of." "What detail? I'm giving it to Brianna. It's done." Julian waved his hand dismissively. I rotated my screen to face them. "You can't bequeath what you no longer possess." The official property records dominated the screen. Unambiguous, irrefutable. "Owner Serafina Winters," it read. "Effective date 5 years prior." Julian's face contorted his complexion, shifting from confident to bewildered to a dangerous crimson. What is the meaning of this?" "Property records," I stated calmly, "from when the bank was threatening foreclosure." Remember that summer, Father, when your company was hemorrhaging money and you'd leveraged every asset, including Shadow Creek? Mother's handkerchief slipped from her grasp, landing unnoticed on the floor. Brianna's perfectly glossed lips parted in an unbecoming gape. "Impossible," Julian sputtered. We reached an agreement with the bank." "No, Father, I reached an agreement. I acquired the mortgage satisfied with the debt and transferred the title to my name, all while you were assuring everyone you had everything under control." Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat again. "I can corroborate these records. Shadow Creek Manor has been under Ms. Serafina Winter's ownership for the past 5 years. But why didn't you say anything?" Mother finally found her voice. "Would you have listened? When have either of you ever listened to me about anything that truly mattered?" The silence in the room was thick with decades of belittled accomplishments and neglected warnings. "You can't do this!" Brianna shrieked, rising to her feet, her scarlet dress swirling around her. "Daddy, make her stop. Actually," Abernathy interjected mildly, given Manor's precarious mortgage history before Ms. Winter's acquisition, she likely saved it from falling into the hands of creditors. I closed my laptop with a soft click. "I've maintained the estate, paid the property taxes, even retained Mrs. Gable as the head housekeeper. Of course, I doubled her salary and extended her health insurance benefits." "You've been paying Mrs. Gable—" Julian looked as if he might be on the verge of another stroke. "I've been depositing checks into your account that she has been returning per my instructions." I wanted to see how long it would take you to notice Father. 5 years. 5 years of returned checks, and you never once reviewed the accounts. Genuine tears, a rare sight, welled up in Mother's eyes. But what about my galas?" Brianna wailed. "My social connections." "You mean the galas that almost resulted in Shadow Creek being raided by the IRS?" I raised an eyebrow. "The networking events that led to 3 lawsuits I quietly settled out of court." She sank back into her chair, appearing suddenly vulnerable and lost. "Shadow Creek isn't a plaything." "Brianna," I said softly, "it's not a status symbol or a party venue. It's the last vestige of our family's genuine heritage before everything devolved into appearances and social climbing. It's also part of our town's history, and I protected it just as I tried to warn you about the market crash before you dismissed me. My company is thriving," Julian snapped, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Your company's stock plummeted 70% last quarter, Father. You're losing market share to biotech competitors, which is why I'm acquiring a controlling interest last week, all 57% of voting shares. That was the other bombshell I had been holding. Might as well unleash it all at once." You what?" Julian clutched at the arms of his chair. "We can discuss the company later." I rose to my feet, gathering my belongings. "For now, let's focus on Shadow Creek. I'll have my assistant forward the summer schedule. You're welcome to use it under supervision with clearly defined rules of conduct, like children." Brianna spat. "You're treating us like children." "No," I retorted, heading for the door. "I'm treating you like the irresponsible adults you've proven yourselves to be. Mr. Abernathy will hand over the paperwork. Oh, and Brianna, next time you want to host a networking event, try networking. Your Instagram followers don't translate into business deals." I left them there, enveloped by their shattered illusions and crumbling pride. Through the window, I could glimpse the lake in the distance, its surface serene and timeless, mirroring the truth I had been safeguarding all these years. Because sometimes the ultimate revenge is not just possessing something, but being the only one who truly appreciates its intrinsic worth. The drive to Shadow Creek felt different now, charged with a sense of liberation. My Tesla, its electric engine humming quietly, followed the familiar curves of Shadow Creek Road past the wrought iron gates that now sported my company's advanced security system. Mrs. Gable awaited me at the end of the driveway, her weathered face breaking into a relieved smile. "Miss Serafina," she said warmly, "they've been calling non-stop. I expected as much." I handed her a bottle of water, her usual brand from the local grocery store. "Any actual emergencies?" Well, she chuckled, Ms. Brianna attempted to gain entry with a moving van this morning, claiming her rightful inheritance before you could change the locks, which was already done. I smiled, recalling the security update notification on my phone. How did she react? Through quite a tantrum. I threatened to summon the authorities until I displayed the updated property registration and security protocols. Then she sped off in that flashy car of hers, scattering gravel everywhere. She shook her head. Your father arrived approximately an hour prior. He's waiting on the veranda. Of course he was. Julian had always treated the veranda as his personal domain, holding court while surveying his kingdom, except it was no longer his kingdom. Thank you, Mrs. Gable. Feel free to take the rest of the day. With pay, of course. She hesitated. I'd prefer to remain should they return. I nodded, understanding her loyalty. She had witnessed me growing up at Shadow Creek and had taught me the basics of cooking. She had been the one to discreetly inform me when Julian commenced to miss mortgage payments 5 years ago. Julian rose as I approached, trying to maintain his CEO bearing despite the subtle tremor in his left hand, a vestige of the stroke he stubbornly refused to acknowledge. Serafina, he began, then paused, taking in my appearance. The simple power suit he had previously dismissed was tailored. The practical flats were understated. Small details that spoke volumes about wealth, a wealth he no longer controlled. You look successful, he said finally. I am successful, father. You just never took the time to notice. He sank into one of the handcrafted chairs, the company, he said, staring out at the lake. You actually acquired a controlling interest. 57% of voting shares. Another 12% in proxy agreements with board members who've lost faith in the current management. Lost faith, his voice cracked. I built that company. And then you stopped building, stopped innovating, refused to acknowledge the shift in the marketplace. I retrieved my tablet, pulling up the company's financial records. Examine these numbers, father. Really examine them. He did, and I witnessed the instant reality pierce through his denial. The dwindling profits, the market share eroding to biotech competitors, the innovation gap that was rapidly transforming into a chasm. It's not too late, I said softly. The company possesses good bones, a sturdy foundation. It merely needs to evolve. Under your management, he said bitterly, under competent management, something you once comprehended before you started prioritizing your golf handicap over quarterly R&D reports. That struck a nerve. He had neglected 3 board meetings this year alone, all for golf tournaments and cocktail parties. He gestured around us. Was this just another hostile takeover? No, father. This was me safeguarding our true legacy, the one place in our family that still holds meaning. I rose to my feet, walking to the veranda railing. Remember instructing me how to sail out there before Brianna transformed the boat dock into a floating cocktail lounge. He smiled despite himself. You were natural. So focused, so determined to understand every nuance. The same way I was focused on warning you about the company's tech vulnerabilities, about the market shifts you ignored. The smile dissipated. Serafina, I tried to confide in you. Father, for years I tried, but you and Brianna were too preoccupied with playing aristocrats to perceive what was transpiring. The delinquent mortgage payments, the diminishing market share. The competitors devouring your core business. So you simply seized control, secretly acquired everything from beneath us? No. I turned to face him. I constructed something of my own first, created my own fortune, my own reputation. Then I protected what truly mattered while you were busy feigning that nothing required protection. My phone vibrated. A notification from the security system. Brianna is returning this time with Mother. The Mercedes swept up the driveway moments later, its tires crunching on the grave. Mother emerged first, her eyes still dabbed at with her handkerchief. Brianna stormed up the steps, her designer heels striking the wooden planks with a violent cadence. Did you change the dock access codes too? She demanded. My friends are arriving this weekend for the poker night. You mean the illegal poker games you've been hosting on my boat? I raised an eyebrow. The ones that violated 3 federal gambling laws. She deflated slightly. Those were networking opportunities. They were foolish risks that could have jeopardized everything. Again, I retrieved my tablet, presenting surveillance photos of these gatherings. Mother gasped. Brianna paled. I've spent 5 years protecting this estate, I continued, from foreclosure, from IRS raids, from your networking disasters. And now, I gestured around us. It's going to become what it was always intended to be, a family legacy, not a party venue. But it's summer, Brianna wailed. The social season is ruined, canceled, I corrected. At least your version of it. Shadow Creek will still host events, charity fundraisers, actual ones, not tax write-offs, environmental symposiums, youth sailing programs, coding workshops, writing classes. Julian looked up sharply. Coding workshops, like the ones you used to sponsor at the community center, I nodded, before everything devolved into status over substance. Mother sank into a chair, appearing to see the estate for the first time. The meticulously maintained gardens, the historic architecture preserved instead of modernized. You've been maintaining everything, she said softly, all this time. Someone had to, I replied. Someone had to remember what this place truly meant. What should our family have meant? Brianna opened her mouth, likely to protest again, but a commotion from the driveway diverted her attention. A group of teenagers, perhaps 15 or 16, were disembarking from a van marked Shadow Creek Youth Coding Academy. Right on time. I checked my watch. The inaugural class of the summer program. Coding Academy. Julian stood up, watching the teenagers eagerly grabbing laptops and learning kits. You're teaching local kids how to code, yes, starting with those who could never otherwise afford access to these educational resources. Some opportunities are worth more than social status, Father. Some legacies are about more than just money. The teenagers' laughter echoed across the water, vibrant and authentic, resonating with possibility the way Shadow Creek used to be before we all grew up and forgot what mattered. You can stay, I told my family, witness what this place is meant to be, or you can leave and continue pretending nothing has changed. Your choice. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just seizing control. It's restoring something to its authentic purpose, even if others have forgotten what that purpose was. 6 months after the revelation at the lawyer's office, Shadow Creek sparkled under a perfect summer sunset. The sound of children's laughter blended with the gentle lapping of waves against the dock, a stark contrast to the thumping bass of Brianna's parties that used to resonate across the water. I stood on the veranda watching the final coding session of the day conclude. Mrs. Gable supervised as the teenagers meticulously stowed their equipment, teaching them the same respect for tools and tradition that she had once instilled in me. They're keen learners, a familiar voice said behind me. Quick studies. I turned to face Julian, watching the scene leaning lightly on his cane. A concession to reality he had finally accepted after the second minor stroke scare. They are happy to be here, I replied. Unlike some who took it for granted, he nodded slowly, lowering himself into one of the handcrafted chairs. The last board meeting went smoothly, I said, taking the chair beside him. The tech integration strategy is ahead of schedule. So I've gathered. He managed a small smile. The stock is up 62% since you've taken over. The same analysts who used to praise my genius are now calling you a visionary leader. How ironic. You know, he turned to face me. I actually revisited your original white paper, the one you submitted 4 years ago cautioning against our technology vulnerabilities. You mean the one you dismissed as unnecessary panic and feminine overthinking? He flinched. I was misguided about everything, the corporation Shadow Creek U. Before I could respond, the sound of tires on gravel signaled another arrival. Brianna's Mercedes pulled up, but something was different. Instead of her signature designer dress, she wore simple business casual. Her hair was styled professionally, and she carried a laptop instead of a designer bag. Sorry for my tardiness, she called out, hurrying up the steps. The coding tutorial ran late. I lifted an eyebrow. Coding tutorial. She flushed slightly. Post. After all that happened, I began to take some classes. I figured I should know what's actually developing in the enterprise rather than just planning luncheons. She paused. The professor affirms I have an affinity for UI or UX layouts. She does, Julian confirmed. She's been aiding the tech team craft the new systems more user-friendly. Turns out all those years of social networking taught her something useful about how people interact with technology. I analyzed my sister observing her openly for perhaps the first time. The rehearsed façade was absent, replaced by something almost genuine. "The program's new students miss you, Mrs." Gable called up from the dock. "They said you volunteered to teach them about digital navigation systems." Brianna brightened. "That's right, I brought the demo units. I will see you both later." She hurried down to the dock, her functional shoes easily navigating the wooden steps. "She's transforming," I said gently. "We all are." Julian replied. "We had little alternative." Mother surfaced from inside, conveying a tray of water. Not the extravagant cocktails she used to request, but the same recipe Mrs. Gable always uses. "The charity forms are prepared," she said, setting down the tray. "The Shadow Creek Youth Educational Foundation complete, grants for sailing and technology programs and history. I even convinced the country club ladies to give generously." How intrigued by education they became when they realized you're now one of the wealthiest women in the state. I accepted a glass of water, watching as Brianna configured her demo on the dock. Teenagers gathered around her, genuinely involved, as she demonstrated the workings of modern navigation systems. "You know," Julian said contemplatively, "I never told you about my father, your grandfather, and how he acquired Shadow Creek." "He was the heir," I said, "like you were intended to be." "No." Julian shook his head. "He purchased it secretly, while everyone presumed he was bankrupt. He built something revolutionary while the family viewed him as an embarrassment." He glanced at me. "Does that strike a chord?" I considered the aged portraits in the library, the ones I had researched while Brianna used the room for photo shoots. Grandfather Wallace, the one they called Wild Wallace, because he invested in cars when everyone else was still betting on equines. "The same." Julian nodded. He waited until the opportune moment, then revealed to them all who had really grasped the future. He sighed. "I forgot that heritage." Became preoccupied with maintaining instead of building. From the dock came a chorus of excitement as Brianna demonstrated something on her tablet. Mrs. Gable stood nearby, beaming with pride at her newest collection of students. "The summer program starts next month," I said. "We're implementing coding sessions to the writing lessons, training youth that tech and heritage can harmonize." "Innovation and heritage," Julian reflected. "Just like what you're doing with the enterprise." Speaking of the enterprise, I removed my tablet. The board authorized my latest proposal. We're launching a legacy division, preserving the best of our ancestry while building for the future. It needs a director. He straightened. "Serafina," Julian said, his gaze direct. "Someone who knows both where we originated from and where we need to proceed. Someone who's realized the hard way what transpires when you neglect to innovate." I slid the tablet across the table. "Interested." He reached up with shaky hands. "You believe in me after what transpired. Belief is gained." I said, my gaze unyielding. "Just like acclaim. Just like success. You instilled that in me once. I just hope you can remember that." Mother emerged with more lemonade just as Brianna's trainees burst into cheers. The sunset painted everything in gold. The lake, the dock, the acquainted sides of the mansion that had viewed epics of winters and summers learn falter and flourish. "I recovered something in the library," Mother said gently, drawing out an aged photograph. "From the day your grandfather purchased Shadow Creek." The photo displayed Wallace Winters, standing bravely on these same portico steps, a delicate smile playing on his lips. Behind him, his own kindred watched on with varied expressions of shock and dawning respect. "History tends to repeat," Julian said, glancing from the photo to me. "Only if we study from it," I answered. Down at the dock, Brianna was concluding her tutorial. The teenagers aided in storing the gear, displaying the same attentiveness Mrs. Gable had taught me years ago. One teen girl remained staring up at the mansion with dreaming eyes. "That'll be yours one day," Mrs. Gable told her, watching her gaze. "If you devote yourself and learn well, Ms. Serafina demonstrates that anything's viable here." I smiled, remembering that girl. The mansion had always been enchanted not because of its fiscal worth or social status, but because of its skill to inspire, to instruct, to evolve. "The board session is on Thursday," I told Julian. "The Heritage Division demonstration is first on the schedule." He nodded, a spark of intent returning to his eyes. "I'll be ready," Julian said. "I hope so," I said, smiling. "Just remember, we're not in the business of sustaining anymore. We're in the business of constructing." As the sun settled on another Shadow Creek night, I studied my family, slowly discovering their authentic function. Mother coordinating teaching curriculum instead of social get-togethers. Brianna mentoring instead of partying. Julian is learning to construct again instead of just storing. Sometimes the ultimate revenge isn't just demonstrating that people are misguided, but in aiding them to become right. Because true heritage isn't about what you own. It's about what you construct, what you instruct, and what you desert enhanced. Then you recovered it. That's what Shadow Creek had always been intended for. That's what we had all finally learned to accept, and that's what we will pass on.